Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the first webinar in our B2B Digital Transformation webinar series. In today's session, we will focus on the seismic shifts we're witnessing in B2B buyer expectations and share proven strategies that can help companies not only keep up, but grow and thrive in the age of AI. We have 4 exceptional speakers for you today. Jonathan Newman is a seasoned executive leader with extensive experience in digital transformation, B2B commerce, and driving innovation and operational excellence in global companies such as Office Depot, Computerland, Belkin, and Belrint International, just to name a few. He currently serves as a strategic advisor to global enterprises, including Grid Dynamics. Throughout his career, Jonathan held numerous executive positions ranging from CEO, COO, CIO, and Chief Digital Officer, where he spearheaded technology and business transformations and delivered industry-recognized innovations, which significantly and consistently drove growth. Prithpal Rhoda is CTO EMEA at Grid Dynamics. With nearly 3 decades of experience in technical leadership roles across both B2B and B2C, Prithpal brings deep proven expertise in aligning technology strategy with long-term business goals. Throughout his career, Prithpal has led cross-functional strategic initiatives, helping organizations scale operations, modernize IT systems, reduce technical debt, and streamline software maintenance costs. In recent years, he has focused on the e-commerce space, supporting businesses as they grow, optimize, and implement modern architecture approaches. Manish Kumar is the Technical Director at Grid Dynamics CTO Office. He brings extensive experience leading technology strategy and digital transformation initiatives. Manish specializes in helping organizations navigate complex architecture decisions and has in-depth expertise in composable commerce, MOC, and cloud platforms. His work spans everything from solution architecture to vendor selection, team building, and project discovery and delivery. He is especially passionate about emerging technologies with a strong interest in AI, machine learning, data science, and low-code, no-code platforms. And our 4th guest speaker today is Stefan Schmidt, VP Product Management at Celonis. Stefan is a renowned technology visionary and a serial entrepreneur with nearly 3 decades of experience leading innovation across B2B e-commerce, product strategy, and digital transformation. He has overseen the implementation and operations of complex digital commerce programs for global brands, including H&M, Grainger, Toys R Us, and Reebok. Stefan was instrumental in scaling Hybreeze from a startup to a global e-commerce leader, culminating in its acquisition by SAP in 2018. At Hybreeze, he shaped product strategy and led the development of core offerings in order management, mobile, and customer service. Stefan also served as Chief Product Officer at Emporex, where he led the development of a next-generation commerce orchestration engine, which was acquired by Celonis in 2024. Alongside his executive role, Stefan is also an active advisor and investor in technology startups, where he helps emerging companies scale through his deep experience in enterprise software, cloud business models, and digital operations. So those are our speakers, and with that, Jonathan, please take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Adi. Good afternoon or good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're kicking off the first of our 5-part series on the imperatives driving change within B2B. Over this series, we plan to share a number of actionable insights and tactics regarding those changes impacting B2B that you can take away back to your organization and hopefully start moving forward. My role within the series is to provide commercial, organizational, and leadership insights around B2B transformation. I've been doing this for a long time, as Adi said, more than 20 years. And hopefully some of the experiences that I've had will be helpful as we explore these key topics. Today, we'll be setting the scene for the series. We'll introduce the backdrop of changing customer expectations and discuss how consumerization as a macro trend is impacting B2B and driving the need for change. We'll also touch on the impact of AI. And in particular, we're going to talk about the impact of AI in accelerating innovation. Today's agenda will introduce consumerization and explain why it's helpful as a view into potential growth strategies. We'll look at some of the B2C tactics that you may want to be able to try and transfer into B2B, and some of the things to consider as you're making that transition. Then we'll have a demonstration from Manish showing an AI-powered tool that can be used to accelerate your internal innovation cycles. At that point, we'll split into a panel discussion where Stefan will join us for a Q&A, and we'll use that as an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have regarding the content we've presented today or B2B digital transformation more generally. As we're going along, as Adi said, if you've got questions, please drop them into the chat, and in the second half, we'll try to get through as many of them as we possibly can. Now let's kick off and talk about how consumerization is impacting B2B. Consumerization sounds like a cliche, but it's not. It's a real thing, it's a reality, it's a macro trend that we've been talking about for a long time. I first presented the concept back nearly 20 years ago. We are all consumers. We expect our B2B experiences to match the best of what we see in the B2C world today, those experiences that we enjoy. As those experiences continue to evolve, the B2B buyers' expectations will continue to evolve with them. As we're thinking about their expectations, it's important that we come back to the key differences between a B2B buyer and a B2C buyer. And when we think about it as a consumer, a shopping activity is a very personal experience. We're buying something for ourselves, or we're buying something for somebody we know. It's often a social experience, it's often something that's enjoyable. In fact, a friend of mine, a former colleague, described it as an exercise in imagining a version of your future self. And I really like that. That's got a sort of nice romanticism about it. Contrast that to B2B. It's not particularly romantic. As a B2B user, we're trying to complete a business process. We're doing something for our job. We're doing something that is a piece of work, and we have an objective. It's not a personal objective, but it's a business objective. With that in mind, our perspective means we have to understand, remember, and adapt to the customer's current business process objective. There's a lot to unpack in that. And in one of the upcoming sessions in this series, we'll actually explore what roles-based personalization means and how it's a toolkit for enabling us to respond to those business process objectives. But when we're contrasting B2C to B2B, one is highly personal, often enjoyable. The other is highly functional, professional, can be enjoyable, but the core motivation is different. It's around solving a commercial business objective. Now, as business leaders, how do we respond to these macro changes and these changing expectations of our customers? Across this series, we're going to try and frame that using 5 key themes, looking at some of the things that successful B2C organizations have done, and then contrasting them to B2B business models and giving you ideas as to how you may pick them up and apply them in your own organization. We look at customer insights and setting priorities. We look at organizational design. We look at key data, metrics, and KPIs. We look at approaches to delivering change. And finally, we look at user personas within B2B. All of those are topics that we cover today and in the 4 following sessions. But in short, keep in mind that B2C organizations have really learned how to eliminate friction across the customer journey. They have developed a reflex or a muscle memory for looking at every single step, every stage, identifying sources of friction, and then testing and testing until they refine and eliminate that friction. That's a methodology and a mindset that as B2B leaders, we need to be building into our organizations. Now, that sounds like a lot, but as if that wasn't enough, the pace of change that we're faced with is also accelerating. Change is no longer linear. It is increasingly non-linear, and that is accelerating with the advent and the emergence of AI-powered tools. You'll see some of that from Manish's demo a little later in this session. But keep in mind that standing still In reality today means you're going backwards. The access to these tools, the expectation, the toolkits, the processes for driving rapid innovation are very well established. Your competitors will be looking at these tools. They will be embracing them. If you're not, you'll be left behind. Now, let's change tack slightly. And first of all, thinking about journey friction, how does technology impact the customer journey?
Thank you, John. You guys can hear me? Great. Yeah, my role in this series is to talk, exactly as John mentioned, about the technology and delivery side of the topics that we cover. So I will start today with friction, and I'll cover some of the reasons why our customers will experience friction. And those two sources will be either poor communication between systems or applications, or poor movement of information between journey interactions. So when we talk about friction that's caused by poor communication between systems, this is something I think that everyone will be experiencing pretty much day to day. So our architectures tend to be ERP centric, and the ERP leads to something that we call poor data democracy. And that means that although the ERP can obviously access its own information very well, it does not readily enable other applications in your enterprise to access the same data. Now, we can get the data out. We all have batch processes and maybe some odd real-time calls, some ETL. But ultimately, I think we recognize that this does lead to friction for our customers. They may see inconsistent data across channels, or they may, even in a single channel, for example, on the web, they may look at a product and see a certain stock level, but then when they progress and they add to basket and go to checkout, they may see a very different stock level, and that causes friction. So, we know that what we would really like is our applications to talk freely and openly to each other. So another type of friction I want to talk about is this journey friction. And I'll give an example. So suppose somebody was to come to your site and maybe spend some time finding products that they're interested in. Then they come back another day, but for them, that's still part of the journey. So when they come back the other day, do we help them, continue where they left off last time? Do we show them the products they were looking at, or do we make them start again from scratch? And then if we take that further, maybe the site is not transactional. So we want their next step with us to be to buy the product. That could be a different channel. It could be offline. Are we going to give them the information they need to do that? Or, do they need to go figure it out themselves? So this friction is, caused by us not providing the customer with the information they need at the time that they need it. So if we look at how to address this, if we want to address this friction, which is poor communication between applications and systems, that is a bit of a strategic fix, right? We're probably looking at technology selection, app modernization, maybe a data project that involves the data lakes and event streaming. I'll talk a bit about that later. What I really wanted to focus on right now is this this friction that's caused by not passing information through a journey. Now, I think this interesting thing about this is the fix for this is often quite tactical, quite small, quite achievable. If we employ some design thinking and think, what does the customer need now to keep interacting, to keep moving forwards? I think these things are readily achievable. And it's also interesting that I think most businesses we talk to, they're already aware of the friction points, and they already have identified a number of candidate fixes, maybe some hypotheses about what they'd like to do. But those ideas tend to just get stuck as ideas. I think, if we think about the reasons for that, I think one of them is probably if in our environments, we're only deploying every 180 days, 90 days, 45 days, then probably, customer friction, fixing that becomes a luxury. And then we start to maybe push business changes that are more directly revenue impacting. So, but the other element is these ideas that often they lack alignment. Maybe there are some objections. We don't really know what the customer will make of these changes. So we feel that if we can mature these ideas, maybe prototype them together, then we produce better candidates that we have more confidence in for when it's time to go live. And that is what Manish will be covering in his demo a bit later. John?
Thank you, Prithpal. So key question's got to be, how do we start responding to these changes in customer expectations? And given part of the key point of view here is consumerization is a big driver, let's step back and understand how the B2C organizations got to where they are. So remember that in a B2C business model, they are trying to win every customer and every order every day. That need has created an internal mindset that is laser focused on innovation and optimization across the entire customer journey. They look at every step, they look at optimizing the conversion rate of that step, they look at the elimination of friction. Contrast that to what I've seen in B2B. Historically, we've focused on surfacing our own internal processes to the customer and then asking them to do that work for us. That's great from an operational efficiency standpoint and helps us hit our sort of execution and cost objectives, but it fails to meet the underlying customer expectation. We can learn from the B2C world. There are proven tactics that can be lifted and applied in the B2B business models. Consumers accept and expect consumerized or consumer-esque experiences in every tool and every interaction that they're having. Our challenge is to take those experiences and to take the tactics that have been honed and proven in the B2C world and move them, transform them, adapt them to fit within our B2B business models. It's not enough to simply mimic those tactics. The nuances of the way our businesses run means that they need to be re-engineered. They need to be carefully re-engineered with an understanding of your customer, your business model, and their underlying job to be done. Those that are successful at understanding the consumerization of their B2B journey and are able to meet the expectations of their customer and able to support the complex B2B processes with an experience that meets the customer expectation are creating a significant competitive advantage. As we go into the next section of this session, Manish's demo will illustrate to you just how far forward the tools that support innovation have moved over the last few years. I want you to look at that and really take on board how powerful it is, how easy it is to be able to create something that brings an idea to life and moves it into a testing phase. Prithpal a moment ago talked about ways of working and touched on design thinking. We pick up on that and just emphasize that that's something that we should also be looking at lifting and learning from successful B2C businesses. Those processes that build agility into our delivery, iterative development processes, the delivery of small incremental changes, and the support of a constant testing and feedback cycle to create those optimization flywheels are absolutely critical, as is the use of technology to support and accelerate those processes. If your organization is not currently looking at those playbooks and those capabilities that we see so prevalent in B2C and looking at how to adopt them in your own organization, you are already falling behind. Your competitors are looking. Best-in-class performers in B2B across industries are now looking at those ways of working and embedding them as part of their new normal. when picking up B2C tactics and moving them into your B2B business, there's something else you really need to keep in mind and want to emphasize. The metrics and the KPIs that a B2C business uses to measure performance will have potentially very different measures of good and bad when you take that tactic and look at it in your B2B business. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at one common metric. Let's look at conversion rate. Now, if I'm running a B2C business and my top of funnel marketing and demand generation activities are working well across my sales funnel, I've got a friction-free experience, and I get to the checkout and my conversion rate's performing in the double digits, I'm going to be ecstatic. That's a great result for a B2C organization. If it's a B2B organization, I look at my e-commerce portal and I see that I'm running at double-digit conversion rates. That may actually be a significant reason for me to be concerned. If I'm running at double-digit conversion rates, that may mean that the only people coming to my portal are those that have already made a purchasing decision and they're just coming to perform that task. That means I'm not using my digital strategy to support net new customer acquisition, or not doing it effectively. Or even worse, when I get my customers onto that site, I'm not using digital strategies to work on my share of wallet expansion strategy. And that's a real miss. So here's an example where the same number on a successful B2C site could actually be a red light warning on your B2B site. We talk about leveraging some of the tactics sort of commercially and operationally, but what about technically? Should we be leveraging B2C technology?
Well, the short answer is sometimes. I think we should, but we need to be selective. I think we should first recognize that in B2B we're a little bit, I think, build biased. I think there's good reasons for that. Our organizations are big, so we have technical capability, and it is feasible to build features in-house. But I think perhaps also there's an accepted wisdom sometimes that the uniqueness of our business is the ultimate barrier to adopting off-the-shelf technology. And I think in 2025 we do need to revisit that somewhat. I think in light of how the landscape has changed in terms of technology available, there are a lot of specific B2B technologies out there, but also even those technologies that you might think are more B2C centric, they're actually so generic and so configurable these days that you can actually deploy them into multiple different environments. And one of the things that we want to do in this series is showcase some of those technologies that we think are good, and we'll be inviting people from those companies to come and share their ideas with us. And the first will be Stefan, who will be speaking shortly. So with regards to technology adoption and selection, I think we are somewhat too feature focused. That's not to say we focus on features too much, but we focus on other things perhaps not as much as we should. So those other things like NFRs, non-functional requirements, and characteristics of the technology that we choose. I think one of the reasons for that maybe is that we are focused too heavily on what we need right now, rather than thinking about what we'll do over a period of time. I think we're thinking about technology over a period of time. We tend to think more about the characteristics of it than the feature it's bringing. But if you look at cloud and SaaS, the big movements in our technology industry, those have been absolute game changers, but they haven't been game changers around features. There have been game changers around characteristics of technology. And these are terms you definitely would have heard of, but maybe they don't mean as much as they should. Microservices, headless, event streaming, secure by design. All these aspects, they actually they actually move our architectures towards our real goal, which is to move quickly, to be agile, to have ideas, put them live, make a mistake, go again. And I think B2C are now definitely ahead of us in agility. Now, some of that is obviously they don't deal with the complexity we do in B2B. But I think also they've been able to ride the wave of this obsession the industry has had on these non-functional requirements. You know, the industry has been focused on trying to make us agile. I think B2C have gone along with that by buying technology. And I think on B2B, to some extent, we've kind of stood back and watched that happen, maybe built a feature or two, right? So, and a concrete example of that would be look at API first, right? What does API first mean? Well, what it will mean is that your applications talk to each other very easily, right? And we mentioned that earlier when we looked at this friction between systems, right? So these things like API first and headless, they really have profound meanings towards our goals. So, you know, if we do want to be friction free and we do want to be seamless and we do want to deploy often, I think we need to appreciate that these are not features, right? These are characteristics of technology. And I think whether we choose to, you know, build or we choose to buy, I think we need to keep them in mind. So we move ourselves towards maybe an evolution of a friction-free experience rather than, let's say, a revolution of a big bang, big software project. Okay, now it's demo time. And so we spoke earlier about tactical fixes and maybe tactical ideas, things that we want to do that stay just as ideas, right? And maybe, and what we're saying is if we can prototype them and do it very efficiently, rather than in weeks, days, in hours, then we can move the conversations forward. And we have a method of doing that. And what we do is we take a functionality from, let's say, a running website, and we copy it to an AI sandpit, okay? And it's fully working because we can get it working with either dummy data or real data. And then that's the start point. And then from there, we're able to iterate, bring a cross-functional team, and at some stage, bringing customers, iterate over this functionality, bring in ideas, listen to all ideas, and work a solution to the problems we're trying to solve. And it's that iterative process that Manish is going to show us now. So over to you, Manish, sir. I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Pratpal. Let me share my screen. Everyone can see my screen, hopefully. So yeah, so my role in the webinar series is to bring to life, you know, some demos and real life case studies. So this is the first one which we have been using not recently with the technology evolution in the last few years in many different shapes and forms. So what you're seeing here is a fictional manufacturer and the product detail page of their website. So they are not, you know, selling direct to consumer, but they have a website with the information about the product. So the first step, which Pratpal mentioned, which is creating that AI sandpit, which I have already done because of the time. So what I am doing, what you're seeing here, is built using a tool called V0, which is from Vercel. As you can see, I can talk to the tool and start, you know, trying things. So on the right hand side, you can see already, you know, the preview. Just one more feature I want to just mention is you can rapidly deploy that with one click of button and generate a URL like this, and you can send to your colleagues and they can, you know, play around with it. So it is not just running, you know, in your local, but it is running in a, you know, in a way that you can send it to your colleagues. So as a first iteration, what I did was I added a where to buy functionality where obviously showing that, okay, you enter your postcode, you can see the nearest dealers. So if I enter a postcode, it now goes and searches and comes back with you know, some data. So this is obviously dummy data, but that doesn't you know, prevent you from, say, injecting an API into this prototype. It is absolutely possible. So let's try an iteration real time, and let's see how this works. So what I am going to try is, you can see here, as a consumer, I'm coming and searching for the dealers. But what if I want to avoid a channel conflict, and I want to give a capability like the user can select their preferred dealer and then give the dealer search results in a way that the preferred dealerships get some preference. So for that, we can talk to the tool. So just to show you as a to show the prompt, what we can say is just pure natural language, no technicalities in it. Where here I am saying add a preferred dealer, create a tabbed experience, show the tabbed experience when the user enters the preferred dealer. So pure English. So let's see how the tool builds this. Sorry, the copy paste server. So you can see here, the tool is actually thinking and talking to you and saying, what it will do. So this is kind of the last few years, how effectively some of these tools have evolved. There are other tools, obviously you can use multiple different tools for this sort of a prototyping.
Manish, quick question. When it produces the visual, it's implying that it wants the visual to sort of look like the rest of the site.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give it UX instructions to make it follow a certain design if you were further on in the prototyping process?
Yes, definitely. So let's show the original prompt just to quickly show everyone how I built the first the sandpit version, which is, I'm just saying, build a PDP. We don't even have to say product detail or anything. The AI can understand that. And saying it is a fictional manufacturer. And then saying the structure, I want it to be like another website. And then what I did here was I gave a brand logo, which was generated by AI, but then I said, use the brand logo theme for the overall website. So it used that theme and built the, that view. Also, I gave some inclination here, or can you use a modern design, symbolize sustainability and innovation, use certain, color theme. You can inject a Figma into it. So it is all possible. So you can see here now, it has created a new version and it explains what it did. Let's see if it works, right? So that is a fun part. So we can open it in a new tab and see if it works. So you can see here, it added a text box with something. So if I just search for without the preferred dealer, it just shows the previous view. Now let's see if we copy something and paste that. You can see already without even asking it to develop a feature like auto suggest or type ahead. It already implemented that feature. But you can see I just copy pasted that. It created a new tab with the preferred dealers matching what I entered here as like 4 of them, and then all other dealers as a separate one. So it just shows this is one one safe use case of AI at this current stage here without worrying you can start using. There is no harm in using something for this sort of a prototype. So yeah, that's the thing. You can ask any questions later, and I will hand over to Prithpal for the next section.
Thank you, Manish. So from now on, we have a discussion and panel. So Manish is part of the panel team. Manish specializes in emerging technology. And here, if you have any questions about the demo, I think it might be fun to challenge Manish a little bit. So instead of asking a question, if you would like to challenge him and the AI to build a feature, and don't be kind, think of a complicated feature if you like, and then maybe Manish can produce that in a few minutes while we're speaking, and showcase another iteration, just so that we all understand how quick this process can be. Now, this is the bit where we test Stefan's audio visual capabilities.
Yeah, the more the audio.
Oh, brilliant.
And yeah.
Yeah, if you're able, can you tell us just introduce yourself, maybe your where you're working now, which is Celonis. Also maybe a bit about your history, because I think that really informs your viewpoint.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, I'm recently through the transition from Emporex to Celonis. I joined Celonis 6 months ago, and Celonis as a company makes processes work. What they do is, and that's what is so intriguing for us when I was still working at Emporex, was they basically give you an X-ray on your ERP, and B2B tends to be very ERP centric, as we heard earlier, and often we don't even know what kind of processes we have encoded into the ERP. And when we want to make them available to our customers, want to consumerize them a little more, want them to make it a bit more engaging or easier to access or reach new audiences, then it's very hard often for us to understand what kind of process have actually been built into the ERP. And Celonis can help you to actually figure that out. Now, my part actually is, or the product I've been working on for the last 2 years is actually, once you have figured out what the process is doing in your ERP, how do you actually get that closer to your customer? How do you actually do not customize it for in the ERP, but actually move it into the web, move it more closer to your customer so they can actually engage with it? And that's where the orchestration engine is coming into play. And the orchestration engine is trying to remove frictions, as we heard earlier from the Dynamics team, about like how can we actually remove frictions between different systems that all play a role in actually fulfilling the promise to the customer. Ordering online, getting information about a product, and especially in B2B, there is a lot more information needed that actually help me in my planning. For instance, when a manufacturer, when does the material actually come to my site, etc., etc. Just to my background, the first project, interestingly, actually that I made in the UK when I moved to the UK in 2006 was actually with Screwfix. And Screwfix is interesting because they very early on understood that they have to get closer to the handyman, to the people on the ground, to the builder on the construction side, who actually wants to buy something to actually get the job done. And they took this whole concept of what can we learn from B2C, what can we learn from the consumerization of this, and actually moved it into the hand of the individual builder, so they can order any sort of product that they need in order to fulfill the job eventually. And it was one of the first projects I worked on where Screwfix really understood we need to be more engaging with our customers. We need to be on their mobile devices, actually already on the time. We need to be easier for them to discover products and figure out what they need to actually get the job done. So yeah, that's my background. That's the stuff I'm working on at the moment.
Okay, so Celonis helps its customers measure what the real journeys are, what are the flows, how are people using points in the system. When you get the results, I don't know if you can share, are people like surprised by what the journeys end up being? Are they surprised at the steps that are taken, or is there surprise at just the volume of a certain journey of another?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually funny. So we all have probably like in our mind how a process runs in the most ideal way. And when people run, for instance, something like Celonis, and they actually put an X-ray on their ERP, they actually discovering that none of their process actually runs in the linear way as we like to believe they're actually running. Celonis famously calls it a spaghetti diagram, because the process goes into all sorts of directions with all sorts of deviations from the original plan. And what you then see actually is where the friction lies, where maybe orders cannot be fulfilled in time, where maybe credit blocks appear because the customer has run out of credit line and hasn't paid his invoices in the past. And what it gives you is actually an idea of like, what can I improve and where should I improve, rather than just second guessing.
That's awesome. We have had a couple of questions come through. I don't know, Manish, if you could speak to any of them. I think one of them's a task to take away, right?
Yeah, I can answer the first question. So yeah, the question is it possible to share with that tool our code repositories? So it starts with a basic understanding of the current site and tools. So the tool which I was demoing, V0, it is a tool which is very good for web part if you are using a React framework called Next.js. So the tool is built by the company who created that framework and maintains that. So if you have a Next.js code base, obviously you can connect to that tool. But there are other tools out there, as I mentioned. There are tools like Replit, Lovable, etc., which comes with varying degrees of features. When connecting your code, obviously, you will have company policies, etc., around security and etc. of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Manish. John, you introduced the idea of non-linear change, and certainly parts of the industry have been moving faster, let's say, than B2B, but B2B's always been okay, right? And as you said, people have always said, "Oh, you're gonna have to catch up. You're gonna have to catch up." But really, we haven't seen that to a large extent, and I don't know what underpins that. Maybe market share, or or maybe a reluctance to change from actual the consumer side. So with AI, can you give the argument that it's actually different this time, right? That you do need to act.
So it's a good question. It's interesting, isn't it? When I say that you see the pace of innovation accelerating, it really does come down to the clever use of both these tools and the organizational learnings from sort of the agile movement over the last 15 or 20 years. So, and what I mean by that is, I've been in organizations where we can sit around as a team and have a great idea and have a great workshop and really sort of brainstorm out what it would be, what we think the impact would be, take some customer input. But then it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks before we're even able to review a detailed design and an envisioning of what that could look like. And when that's your normal, it's impossible to innovate quickly. You touched on it when you said that if your delivery cycles are really long, you end up focusing on the big things that are guaranteed to drive cost and efficiency, not necessarily the small things that are guaranteed to create customer delight. And what you see with these tools is you can now put a group of people together, and with this tool as a facilitator or as a manifestation of the discussion, you get to the end of the session and you can have something you can take to your customers and test. And just think about how transformative that is. You go to the investment of putting a cross-functional team together and ideating around a particular problem, and within a few hours, you can actually be putting it in front of customers and getting real feedback on maybe even different variants of an answer to come up with what's best. So I think this is actually a transformative moment, an inflection moment. And my advice to anybody would be, that's the normal in terms of the tooling. Is your organization ready to embrace it? Do you have that sort of agile mindset? Are you thinking in the form of empowered cross-functional teams? Are you thinking iteratively? And are you building everything in your organization on a test and learn mindset? Because if you're not, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the tools. You're not going to get that acceleration, but you run the risk of being left behind as everybody else does.
Thank you, John. Stefan, maybe test your audio again. So we talked to a lot of businesses. We're actually, I would say, happy. I would say that how many of them are still on the Hybris platform, right? It's obviously stood the test of time. it's an example of a technology that served B2C and B2B very well, right? I don't know if you can share some of the thinking at that time, which allowed, you know, the tool to make that transition. I think it probably started off, if I'm right, mostly on the B2C side, and then actually started serving a lot of B2B customers over time.
Yeah, sure, happy to do that. So yeah, perhaps it was interesting because we kind of stumbled into the B2B part a little bit, and I saw also a question about how do you distinguish between, you know, how your end customer would like to experience the site and buy from it, and then how do you support your partners? And the approach we took there was that you had the ability to serve those different personas through personalization and to support different needs and expectations by, for instance, allowing the partner to explore the website in a couple of different ways. And that made it possible to serve these two personas on very much the same platform. The other thing that we saw was that you wanted to figure out what was actually that you were trying to do. So what we saw was that especially partners who were smaller and that they could not be served through traditional ways of, for instance, phone service or individual sales support, businesses like SchoolFix would steer them towards a website to serve them better with self-service, to provide them with not just the ability to buy, but actually to explain to them how to use products. I remember working on a project with Henkel, and Henkel was on their B2B side, especially about like how to utilize a glue in the right way and explain more what the glue was doing than just about selling. Selling became a second notion rather than the first one.
Thank you, Stefan. John, we've had a question from Roy. I think you should be able to see that.
I can, Roy, and Roy, good question, and you're right, it's a challenge. So if you think about what you've said, how do we translate B2C best practices when there are multiple personas and personas with conflicting needs? That is definitely a challenge. So gratuitous plug for later in the series, you definitely should sign up for the third webinar, because we are going to explore roles-based personas. But just a short version of answer to that is, I think you're going to struggle to have a single answer to that problem. And that's where, as you start looking at increasing the sophistication of your customer journeys, that you start to have roles-based optimization of them. So those that need to be more consumer-esque can strip out some of the complicated approval or channel integration steps that you may need for other personas. And if you can effectively identify the customer early in the journey and then deliver that personalization, they can get an experience that matches their needs without having to try and solve that conflict in a single experience for everybody. Now, Manish has just interjected, which means I think that he's taken the challenge that you set, Andrew, and got something to show us.
Yeah, you can see here. Andrew's suggestion was, can we add a subscription option, which recommends the customer with a different option. So yeah, here we go. It's the added monthly billing, annual billing, savings, most popular, smaller fees, medium business, enterprise. So yeah, as you can see, it was in the meantime I was took that and created a so you can see what I said. I just said add a feature which allows the customer to subscribe, and it should suggest subscription option to the customer. It's just 2 sentences, and it created this beautiful widget. So that is that's a power of these tools. It will be a shame if we are not using some of these in our day-to-day.
Anyone seeing that for the first time, if you're not wowed by the potential of a tool like V0 to completely disrupt how you engage with your team on taking something from an idea to a testable working piece of software, I'll be astounded. I look at that and I look over the last 20 years and the times that would have been absolutely transformative to discussions I was having with the board regarding securing investment, or discussions I was having with stakeholders around prioritization, or issues that customers are flagging up that, it just felt like we were swimming in treacle and unable to solve them. Whereas we could put something in front of them and get it validated almost overnight. So I think this is an incredible advancement.
Yeah, and just to build on this, so what Manisha showed you was how he generates the user interface and the interaction with the customer there. But if you think about the subsequent process that sits behind it, it actually takes the subscription or that takes the order. That's where process orchestration comes into play. And instead of manually coding that process or building it into a backend for front end or other technology, or actually into the ERP itself, what we do with process orchestration is we give you the opportunity to configure it, to not code it anymore. And you can actually, along with these tools, now change the process in the way that you would like it to run, and then actually adapt it to what you're actually building in the front end dynamically. And that makes it much faster to innovate, to change, to adopt, to run experiments that before I hadn't been able to do, or it would take you a long time to implement.
Stefan, while you're here, we have a question, and that is if you could explain in a bit more detail how the process orchestration product that you mentioned works and how it relates to the discovery of processes within an ERP.
Yeah, happy to do that. So imagine you discover in your ERP any insufficiencies in how you may be processing your orders, or how you responding to your customers in a dispute, for instance, etc. And you thinking about, hey, this is an opportunity to improve my process. This is an opportunity to change something. And in the past, you would have actually go into the ERP and make those customization. I mean, there's a reason why so many ERP installation takes so long, because there's a whole lot of customizing going on that is actually built into the ERP. And like what we see, for instance, with SAP at the moment, if you want to move from R3 to R4, it takes you a very long time, because you have to transform all these processes from A to B. With the process orchestration, you can actually code these or configure these processes outside of the ERP, outside of the system of record, and you can actually change them more dynamically to what you actually want them to be. And the process orchestration is like a glue between different systems. It orchestrates literally all the different systems that eventually play a role in fulfilling either an order or interacting with the customer, interacting even with agents that do other things, right? And the orchestration in your job is really to connect all these different things. I mean, in a typical commerce solution, these days you have between 20 and 30 different applications that all play a role. And the orchestration engine helps you to make these things work together, but in the context of the process. And more importantly, you do not build them into the ERP, you're not building them into the systems of record. You're actually keeping them in a more neutral space, so that if you decide few months down the line that the process is actually changing, that the process is actually adapting or has to adapt to that, you can do that, but you don't have to customize or rebuild your system of record in order to do that. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Stefan. We have an interesting question. This one's going to be for you, John, because it's difficult, and it's from Jose. And I think Jose's getting to the the ultimate reality, which is, when we're looking at things like emerging technology and AI, ultimately it becomes, org change in our B2B environment is going to be the ultimate barrier to adoption, right? So, Jose wants, this iteration, that's definitely something that he's behind. He wants to spin off a part of the company that works in a certain way, but he feels that, there'll be resistance. I know we're covering maybe a bit of that in our next session, but can you talk a bit about that? I know in your career, Sterling, that's probably been something you've been particularly good at.
I saw Jose Maria's question and I was hoping it wouldn't come up because you're right. It's a complicated one to answer. And Jose Maria, it's one that I'm very happy to have a chat to you about offline, because I think to answer it properly, I need a little bit more context of what some of the internal points of friction are. But so what I've found is when it comes to getting an organization to embrace a different way of working, it is a very complicated process. If I go back a few years, my time at Office Depot, I really struggled to sort of partner with the finance organization to get them to understand that we were going to move our digital delivery organization to an agile model. We said, okay, great. So what projects are you going to deliver next year? I said, I don't know what we're going to deliver next sprint. These are the problems that we're going to try and solve, but I want the team to be empowered to solve those problems. And the CFO is looking at me going, no, it does not compute. I don't understand. And we walked around it, for what ended up being several months to try and get a model that I could go and lead the digital team to do what it needed to do and focus on solving the customer problems. But made sure the finance organization found that they had the predictability and the control. And it was really the development of that partnership between the CFO and I, and getting to a shared understanding of how we could balance control with that flexibility. It took ultimately probably 2 or 3 annual cycles to get it really bedded in and to have the digital organization working at the pace that it needed to. But that transition from tell me the 3 projects you're going to run next year, which was typically a question I got in June or July, to a model where we were able to delegate and empower the teams to make sprint by sprint decisions against an agreed set of priorities was a big mindset shift. Jose Maria, I know I've not really answered your specific question, but I need a little bit more detail. So I think you've got my contact details. Ping me, and I'd love to jump on a call and chat through that with you.
So, John, I think there is one outstanding question I'll answer now. The rest we will answer offline, and that's regarding data as a more strategic part of transformation. Will we address that in further episodes of the webinar? And the answer to that is yes. John, if you can wrap up, that would be great.
Certainly. Well, let me start by thanking you, Stefan. I know that technically and logistically we've had some challenges today, but thank you for joining and thank you for your insights during that discussion. And thank you to all of the participants who submitted their questions. There's some great stuff in there, and it's possible we can follow up on some of it offline. So today we've covered a lot, right? We've talked about changing expectations, consumerization, and how that is one of the key imperatives driving digital transformation, or the need for digital transformation. We've talked about B2C tactics and their applicability in B2B, the need to re-engineer or adapt those to successfully embed them in your B2B business, and to use those learnings from the B2C world to solve your problems and meet your customer expectations today. And we've talked about how AI is disrupting and accelerating. And I would imagine that many of you have seen some of that for the first time today, some of those tools, and are pretty impressed. What we can now do as digital teams and how quickly we can move is mind-blowing. If you're not getting yourself ready to embrace and embed that in your organization, and you're continuing to work on extended long cycles, I'm sorry, but you're going to fail and you're going to get outmaneuvered by your competition. So just keep that in mind. It's certainly a call to action. Now, next time, we're going to dive into some of the core components of the customer journey. We're going to look at that from a data and insight and an understanding of the B2B persona and how those things drive growth. We'll be joined by Emily Pfeiffer, Forrester analyst, who tracks many of the technologies in this space and has got a great update and some great insights to share with you. And we've got some AI-driven case studies that will hopefully impress you as much as today's demo. We're on again in 2 weeks on the 17th of June. Look forward to seeing all of you, hopefully, at that next session. Until then, thank you very much for joining us today and take care.